Renaissance artwork, Humanism versus Secularism. By Cooper Anderson, Brady Burton, and Tyler Bille.
The Renaissance originated in Italy during the Pro-Renaissance period. It promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. It was also credited with bridging the gap between the Middle Ages and modern time. The word Renaissance in French means rebirth, marking the transition from the medieval to the now known, modern world by spirit, or time of the revival of art. Beginning in the 13th century and extending to the 17th century, promoting the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. During the development of the Renaissance, there were many influential people, but a few important figures are Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli, Raphael, Pietro Bruegel, El Greco, Hieronymus Bosch, Jan van Eyck, and Hubert van Eyck. Southern Renaissance was known for frescoes, oil and tempera paintings artwork. The Northern Renaissance artist was known for its oil on panel paintings. Portraits on wooden panel paintings, as well as woodcuts and other forms of printmaking, were common, along with realistic, expressive altarpiece art. Secularism is a belief held by people during the Renaissance that humans should focus on their life on Earth rather than their afterlife. Another way to identify them is to look for people doing things in daily life. The two important people or artists who researched for the topic of secularism were Bille Uxello and Michelangelo. A goldsmith in his shop by Christus, Petrus is an example of secularism art, because it shows a tradesman doing his job in daily life and is not related to the church. It was signed and dated in 1449 by Petrus Christus in Flanders after the death of Jan van Eyck. The Hunt in the Forest by Bille Uxello, painted around 1470. It is one of the best-known painting in the Ashmolean Museum, Oxford, England. Also, Uxello used vanishing points and geometric shapes to create it. This is an example of secularism, because these people are hunting for food and doing what they think is right instead of what the church said. The Donatello by Michelangelo was painted between 1504 and 1506, and is the only finished panel painting by the mature Michelangelo to survive. Now in the Uffizi in Florence, Italy, and still in its original frame, the painting was probably commissioned by Agnolo Doni. Battle of Centaur by Michelangelo was sculpted during 1490 to 1492, and it was the last work Michelangelo created while under the patronage of Lorenzo di Medici. It was one of the paintings that Michelangelo didn't use his bow drill to carve. Humanism was initiated by secular men of letters rather than by the scholar clerics who had dominated medieval intellectual life and had developed the scholastic philosophy. The scholarly writings of Petrarch from 1304–1374 is often called the father of humanism. Humanism was initiated by secular men of letters rather than by the scholar clerics who had dominated medieval intellectual. The triumph of the virtues, Minerva expelling the vices from the garden of virtue, 1502, showing a few angles and people moving somewhere else. This is an example of humanism, because you can see the arches and people symboling religion that are in the sky. The tribute money painted Masaccio in the 1420s. This is an example of humanism, because it shows arches and the start of a dome of the building they are meeting in front of. The figures in the central picture seem to be structured on horizontal lines, but when you look carefully, they are actually arranged in a semicircular composition, with Jesus, Peter and the tax collector forming the focal point. The Crucifixion of Saint Peter by Caravaggio was painted in 1601 CE. Saint Peter, already nailed to the half-raised cross, provides the focus of the composition. Following the tradition that he chose to be crucified upside down so as not to rival Christ. Artwork that has secularism and humanism is a mixture of the spirit of learning with a belief that humans can decide for themselves, humanism, and a belief that people should focus not on the afterlife but life on earth itself, secularism. When an artwork is examples of humanism and secularism, humanism emphasizes human dignity and the love of nature. This philosophy sees humans solving problems with rational thought and without the influence of secular or religious institutions. A Festive Company in a Renaissance room by Dirk Hels and Dirk van der Linde was painted in 1628. At first sight, this is a festive scene the parkgoers play, eat and make music. But the painting has a double meaning. It warns against licentious behavior and calls for moderation and chastity. Young Hair by Albrecht Dürer was painted in 1502. It is one of the most recognized and beloved works in the history of art. Dürer stepped away from the traditional Renaissance genres and created an extraordinary realistic representation of quite an ordinary animal. The End.